Another character who's played an outsized part in your life, and you mentioned her earlier, of course, is Carole Baskin. I'm honestly curious what your first impression was of her before you really knew anything about her.
Okay, well, you know how I even found out about Carole Baskin was I was standing at a gas station in Oklahoma City one day, and this was like back in 2006, and I was looking at the Oklahoma City newspaper, and on the front page here, it's talking about this little
Whoop.
roadside zoo, and I got to reading it, and it was about me, and then I saw at the bottom that it was written by Carole Baskin, and I'm like, who the hell is this person that is talking about my zoo? And so I go back and I Google her, and come to find out, she has a place in Florida. She's claiming she has 150 big cats, and her husband is missing. Okay, so the old police chief of me kicks in, and I'm like, well, her husband is missing since 1997. Why is this woman picking on me? And the more I dug in, the more fascinated I got that she was running 7 nonprofits from one location, and she was raising money off of animals, and she was buying rental property and selling them to her other nonprofit for $10. And I should have just left well enough alone. But the more I dug, the more criminal activity I found that Carole was involved in. And I started interviewing people. I flew to, it's on my YouTube channel. I flew to Florida and filed charges with the sheriff's office for 60 counts of notary fraud. And this lady just kept on and on and on, and she built websites about me. Then I was her most wanted for animal abuse and everything else, all because I bred and I let people pet baby tigers. And it never got to the point where people think from the show, that Joe wanted to kill Carole and it was this horrible physical confrontation. What it turned into was Carole made money from me convincing her followers that I was an animal abuser, and they gave her money to try and stop me. And I made money on my online television show convincing people that she was batshit crazy, wears flowers on her head, and she killed her husband. And that's what it turned into. And it just, it escalated with the following, and then people started, paying us to do dares on TV. Hell, we wore diapers sometimes. We acted like we were smoking pot sometimes. And then somebody paid us one night to blow up a sex doll and dress like Carole. And we did. And unfortunately, they used that against me in court.
Now, you mentioned we were talking about going back in time, and I was going to ask you, if you go back in time, would you have gotten as far away from her as soon as humanly possible? But then you said you wouldn't even rewind the clock back that far. Why not?
Well, because first of all, you couldn't get away from Carole. Okay, she built websites about you, and we have the evidence, and she even testified in court that she paid people to follow me when I did my magic tour with tigers, at the mall. She paid somebody to follow my whole tour and report to her everything I did. You couldn't run far enough to get away from Carole. So all I done was I worked my ass off and I hauled scrap iron to pay lawyer bills to keep fighting her in court. That's all you can do for Carole. But Carole wasn't gonna shut me down. She couldn't for 11 years. She had that $1 million judgment on me for 11 years. She spent $2 million trying to collect $1 million. And this was all of donated money, under Big Cat Rescue. So Carole wasn't a threat to me. It was Jeff conned his way into the zoo and conned his way to get his name on half the property, telling us he was an investor when he was actually pissed broke. And him and James were running such a criminal enterprise with sex trafficking and bank fraud and identity theft and everything else that it came to a point that I left my zoo. June the 16th of 2018, I walked away. I gave them the zoo. And I came to Gulf Breeze and rented a house and got a job washing dishes at Peg Leg Pete's. And I was perfectly happy. And 3 months later, they still couldn't stand it that Joe Exotic still outdone them and had a better zoo, and they couldn't run a zoo. Okay, they wanted my zoo, they got my zoo, they couldn't run it. And if you see what the USDA and the feds did to Jeff Lowe afterwards by raiding him and showing how many animals were starved and died and everything else, the man just couldn't accept the fact that he could never be me, because he dresses like Evel Knievel and Robbie Knievel. He stole Robbie's identity. I mean, he dresses to this day like Robbie Knievel. He always has to be someone else because he can't be himself, because he hates himself. He sells his wife to have sex with other people while he watches. We have those phone recordings from his wife. They drugged girls at the zoo to have sex with them and make videos and blackmail them. And we have recordings off of their phones that Lauren recorded admitting to raping people. You know, these people are vile. And if I could wind back time, I'd just wind it back to 2017 where I never met Jeff.
At what point did you realize that the prosecutors were looking at you as a prime suspect? I mean, at what point did they make it official to you that they were looking at you and that you were a suspect to them?
When they arrested me at the hospital in Gulf Breeze on September the 7th, 2018. Before that, I had no clue.
So, Joe, I know one of the convictions you received was from a dying tiger killed that was referenced in the documentary, and they ruled against you because they said you didn't have the proper paperwork to euthanize it. They weren't. I don't know if they were really actually ruling so much on the morality of the issue. It was seemingly more regulatory. Is that something that you wish more people knew about?
Okay, well, you know, I'm here. I'm not here again for animal cruelty or putting tigers to sleep. I'm here for taking 5 tigers without a permit, like I went hunting or something. Okay, my USDA license protocol said euthanization by gunshot or by injection. My veterinary protocol that was signed up by my inspector and my vet said euthanization by gunshot or by injection. Okay, now keep in mind, since 1999, when running that zoo, we euthanized all kinds of endangered animals, right? Never needed a permit. And also keep in mind, the Federal Fish and Wildlife Game Warden who arrested me and charged me with this, okay, in the 23 years that I ran that zoo, not one time did a federal wildlife agent come and inventory how many cats or endangered animals I had, how many were born, how many had been moved to other zoos, how many have died, or where the bodies were of the ones that were dead. Never, okay, until they needed to put me in prison. So my inspector, who couldn't be found for trial, okay, my federal attorneys that were paid by the government claimed that they couldn't find my federal inspector. And I don't know how you don't find a federal employee to subpoena him for court. But she came through the zoo every time she inspected, and she always said, Joe, why are you making these animals stay alive that are so old and crippled? Because you have 260 more tigers. Why don't you put some of these to sleep? Okay? The answer, honest answer, David, is because crippled and old animals in a cage up front, the first ones that you see, raise more money because people feel sorry for them, and you're supposed to be trying to save them, okay? And that's how Carole makes money, is by operating on animals on YouTube and Facebook. It's just a scam. And unfortunately, I got wound up in the same scam, right? So when I got ready to start leaving the zoo, I called PETA myself, and Brittany Pete helped me move over 80 tigers and lions, bears, primates, the chimps, everything. I was moving off the zoo because I wanted out. After Travis died, I was done. Okay? I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep up with all the drunk employees, the drugs, the problems, people getting hurt, Sap lost an arm. I just couldn't take it anymore after Travis got killed. Okay, so we needed to put these 5 tigers to sleep because winter was coming, okay, and they couldn't walk properly, and I didn't want them to suffer. So I have an option. I can either tranquilize them, and tranquilizing them is not a pretty picture. You shoot them with a dart that's 8 to 9 inches long, and it has a 22 gauge primer in it, and it travels at 200 miles a second. And it hits that animal so hard and so fast that the gel cap has to penetrate the skin in order for the dart to not fall out. And the animal's climbing the fence, screaming, freaking out, and then you have to shoot them 5 or 6 more times, depending on how fat they are, how skinny they are, how many times they've been drugged and they're used to the drugs, and so on, okay? So for 45 minutes to an hour, this animal is puking. It is having seizures. It is having convulsions, and it's just ugly. So that way the vet can walk in and kill it. Where a gunshot is done instantaneously if it's done properly, and that's to the brain. So I got my cats to come to the side of the cage because they're my kids, and I put them to sleep, and I buried them side by side respectfully with all of their body parts and their teeth and everything. Okay, so we have evidence now in text messages between the agents and Jeff and James that the only way they were going to convict me of murder for hire was to recharge me with 20 animal charges. So they dug up those 5 tigers and they cut their heads off, okay? And they paraded pictures and photographs of rotten tiger heads with arrows through them to show the gunshot holes in their skulls, and made me out to be this horrible animal killer in order to convict me for murder for hire that they couldn't get to stick.
Do you think
and that's the story, okay?
When I was reading on it a little bit, I was myself as a lawyer rather surprised that they combined your 2 trials into 1 trial instead of 2 separate trials. Do you think that the fact that they combined these things together may have played a role in your verdicts? From a legal standpoint, the term we use is one prejudices the other. Do you believe that played a role in your verdicts?
Hey, during my before my trial, we filed a motion to sever the cases, and this same corrupt judge refused to sever them. Okay, so they tried me with them all together, and seriously, during my trial, if you read the transcripts, it's more about the Big Cat Safety Act and animal abuse than it is about murder for hire. Okay, so I got convicted. Then, and also keep in mind, from September the 7th to March of 2018 to March the 25th of 2020, I was kept in solitary confinement. So I couldn't call nobody. I couldn't help build my case. So I had to use free lawyers. Okay, and they'd done everything they wanted to themselves, right? So I got convicted, and I wanted the cases severed. Okay, well, then I went to prison, and they did the same thing to me. The first 89 days was in solitary confinement. The next 11 months was in a warehouse above the hospital, okay, by myself. No access to lawyers, no access to help and build a case. So I had to use a free lawyer again for my first appeal. And he chose not to appeal my cases to be severed. He only wanted to go for the sentence being too long. Well, we won that appeal for the sentence too long, and the same corrupt judge, what did he do? He just gave me 1 year off.
He reduced it a year.
So here I said again with the same aspect, okay, except this time I poured $500,000 into lawyers, but everybody wants to go their own route, and nobody wants to sit down and talk to Joe about the story. Oh, Joe, why did you do this? Why did you say this? What led you up to this? Okay, they all based their own stories to defend me off of Netflix. Never, David, never in 6 years have I been able to sit down and look at evidence and tell my lawyer that I'm paying my story, because they all come up with their own damn story, and it's my life. Because why? Because they're all on TV. They're all on court TV doing this. You know, they're driving big buses to White House to get attention. Hell, my life has been a show. over television.